Okay, welcome back to Unbound Being. Today I wanted to speak about language itself and to demonstrate how language itself is actually a trap, or could be called a loop in which we get caught. And once we realize that language itself is a trap, that we actually need to be able to rest in silence, in stillness, in what is called quantum resting or meditation, because it is the next level into reality. It's a level up from language, from verbalizing, from wording. And so I used a few words, I wrote a few things down on this sheet of paper here, and I used two words. Basically, I wanted to describe the word describe, or speak about the word describing. And I'm also going to go into spelling. Most of you have already heard about spelling. So I'll go into describing first. And let's go into spelling first, because spelling is, you know, we've seen it before. To put a spell on something is to actually to trap something, to indoctrinate something, to trick somebody. So I put here down, like, even from the definitions online, you can find that a spell is a series of words that has magical powers. If you're under a spell, then what you do is out of your control, because your thoughts and your actions are dictated by the spell. In other words, you're being under the influence of those words. You're under the influence of those words. A spell is a series of words that has magical powers. If you're under a spell, then what you do is out of your control. Your thoughts and actions are dictated by that spell. And so even spelling is defined as a person's ability to spell using words. So if somebody is good at spelling, they're good at the ability to use words to spell, their ability to spell using words. And so we see that the spell that people put on, like black magic, is actually language itself is a spell that we put ourselves under and that we put others under. So the importance that we give to language by always wanting to speak and describe and delineate and, you know, explain, and all these ways of trying to, with words, describe the entire universe, is in a way a spell we put upon ourselves. It is literally a spell that we put on ourselves. So by having this belief that through language, which is what I'm doing right now with this video, we can actually see or know reality through a self-made construct that is language. Language, therefore, is itself a spelling magic, a magic spelling technique. And we don't only spell for others, we don't put spells on others, we put spells on ourselves. And this is why I say, and many others have said as well, that teaching real liberty, freedom, the ability to undo the spelling is to be able to meditate, to be able to rest, to be able to be the being that we are, the awareness that we are, the consciousness that we are, the presence that we are, without having to always make words, always talk to ourselves, always think. So thinking and talking is spelling. When we talk to others, we put spells on them. When we talk to ourselves, we call that thinking. And that's also a form of spelling. And so the next word I wanted to go into is the word describe, to describe something. And now, if you look at the etymology of these kinds of words, it's really interesting. I love etymology because originally, many of the words that we now use have lost their power. Originally, they were true to what they meant. So, for example, if we look at the word to describe, we first take scribe because it's de and scribe. So, scribe, the etymology or the meaning or definition of scribe is really to write. The people who were scribing, you know, scribing, they were writing. And to scribe or to write also means to trace, to lineate, to portray something, or to outline something. Which means, of course, like you say, to write or to trace, you make a limit. You can trace a line and then you take a circle, for example, or a box, and you box it in. So to scribe something, or to trace something, to delineate something, to portray something, is all defining the word scribe as a word that wants to put a fixed solidity onto something. It says, this is boom, and it defines it, right? To define is the same thing, which is to find or to scribe. Now the word de, which is the word that comes before the scribe, so de-scribe, before scribe, the de comes from reversal or removal. So undoing it, to take it away or down, to degrade or to reverse or remove, to undo. So to describe something is actually to take away the scribing, the description. So to describe something, it was not really meant as we now seem to interpret the word. To describe means that you take language, you take the structures, the delineations, the limitations away. It's not like we're actually boxing in, and again, we're removing the box. So to describe is to remove the traces, to remove the lines, to remove the writings, to remove the portrayal of that, of something, to remove the outline which boxes it in, to remove the limitation, therefore, of the very spell or language that was the cause of trapping or spelling us into this trap, this spell. So to describe, which is what I'm doing in these videos, is to use language still to remove that very limitation, to remove the spell. And the final result or purpose or the way or the truth of that describing brings us back to the causal, the original, the eternal, the being that we truly are before we decided to spell ourselves or to put spells on ourselves and others, or to have been placed under these spelling of language and words. And so to describe something was to undo, to break down the structures that make us believe that we're this or that, that all the things you hear in the world, people are so vehement, so driven, so convinced of something or another, something that they believe in, whether that's a religion or politics, they're all boxed in. And so to describe is to unbox, to reveal, to dismount, to break apart, or to undo, right? So that's to describe. And for example, we also say things like depict. When we're depicting something, we're trying to describe, we're depicting, we're delineating. All of it means the same thing. Because when we lineate, it's making lines, right? To lineate is mark with lines. To lineate, all these lines. So to delineate means to undo the lines, to remove the lines, therefore remove the box, remove the trap, remove the spell, remove the intoxication with a false description or false scription, really, and return us to a more vast, more spacious, more open, more undelineated way of seeing things, or being, or way of being, really. And that's what we're going to get to in the end of this video. So the same thing we say with depict. He's trying to depict something. Well, to pict something is to picture. And then again, a picture is something that's boxed in, like the original pictures that we used to have. Always a picture, like a square box. We're stuck in that picture. So to depict something is to remove that picture. Like, for example, here I say to picture is to paint, right? To paint a picture. To depict. So to depict is to remove the boxed in aspect that we have now squared in and made solid and made a make-believe, which then is not the same as somebody else's depiction of the universe or a religion or what God is or whatever this world is about. And then we go to war because one has this box, the other one has that box. They don't coincide, and so we have all this duality and fighting going on. So there's also this other thing which is interesting about this is subscription, because for example this YouTube channel and all these YouTube channels have the same thing. Again, we're talking about subscribe. Again, we're talking about the word scribe. So to subscribe, well, the word sub, the suffix sub, means to be under or act as a substitute for. So sub is always under, like a submarine is underwater, you know. Subdermal is under your skin. You know, all these things is subconscious, is below the conscious, under the conscious. So sub is a word that from its root etymology, it would describe below. So when people are on YouTube and they subscribe to a channel, then they're basically the channel is describing. It's somebody that defines something. Let's say my channel, for example, is a channel that boxes things in a certain way that is, you know, true to my conditioning and my history and the way I see things and all these stuff. It's a limitation that can be called Roald with my background, my education, my conditioning and all that. Therefore, I am a scription. I'm a scribing. I scribe. And then when somebody wants to become a member of the channel, we hit the subscribe button, which means that you place yourself in a way under. Now, I'm not trying to say that I put anybody underneath what I do, what I subscribe, or what I scribe, what I depict, what I speak about. I'm actually saying this channel is about unsubscribing from the illusion, unsubscribing from that which is false, right? So, but in the word from YouTube, it shows the spelling. It shows this inferiority. It shows that you're saying in a way by subscribing, we're spelling ourselves. We're putting a spell on ourselves. We're saying, here is somebody that scribes, which means somebody that delineates, and I'm going to put myself under that as like a follower, as some kind of like secondary, a lower level of that, which is the way that this Facebook and YouTube and Google and all these fallen systems are actually using language to spell ourselves or to bind us to the spelling, because we're adhering to the spelling language. I don't know exactly what power these words carry to really put us under a spell, but it seems very strong, because almost everybody on earth has this necessity or this tendency to think that thinking and describing and wording and language, by using that, we're actually getting somewhere, when in fact we're in the main trap itself. The use of language is probably the biggest trap, because it is a continuous spelling or putting spells on ourselves and others. So don't, if you do subscribe to my channel, it is to basically unsubscribe from all of the programming. Then you also see that when they said sub is an act as a substitute for. So here we see again, to substitute. Again, we see the word sub, which is under, and to stitute. A stitute is a thing, like a thing itself, like the original, like let's say word with stitute is a thing. Or they also say to give the verb form. To stitute, or to give the verb form, which is to make an action, because a verb really is an action, a verbing. It's a movement in the cosmos, and to actually give that form. So we're trying to describe again, to give form to a thing. So we say, oh, that thing is, and we start describing it or scribing it, really, not describing it, but scribing it first, trapping it, inboxing it, enveloping it, delineating it, and trapping it, therefore, and limiting it, limiting the universe itself, because we seem to have this urge to always subscribe, or so in other words, to put down from the thing itself, to take the thing, and instead of just knowing it, seeing it, perceiving it, we have this tendency to name it, and therefore we subscribe to that thing, and therefore we say to the child, like, I think they say things like, that's a tree. Well, we call it a tree. That's the spelling. We call it a tree, but that, the tree, right? What the thing you see is what you see. The tree is a tree. I mean, it's not a tree in a word. It's that moving object, just this appearance in consciousness. It's perceived. And we say then, look, that's a tree. And in doing so, we we put a spell on the actual perceiving in the moment of that object, that beautiful, intricate, unexplainable, mysterious phenomena, and we put a spell on it by saying that's a tree. That's what we do. In other words, we subscribe to that, or we substitute, and that's what it means to substitute the word for the actuality, for the direct experience, for the beingness of it all. To substitute is therefore to remove the direct experience of that which is the experience and replace it with this stale, dull, empty wording, this spelling. And we put a spell on the vibrance, the aliveness, the truthfulness, the direct experience, the pure perception, the intimacy of the consciousness phenomena in which we live, the richness of it all. And so we see the same thing with In-stitute when we look at the word stitute, right, which is that thing in itself, the actual experience. We also have institutions, right, to institute something. And that's to set in motion or establish something, especially a program or a system, right? So to institute something, and then we get all the institutions from that, whether it's religious institutions, political institutions, governmental institutions, scholarly institutions, schools and things like that. We have medical institutions. It's all to set in motion or establish something, which is to limit, to establish, which is again to delineate, to depict, to trap, to box in, to outline, right? To trace, to write or scribe. So again, when we institute something or have institutions, we set in motion or establish something, especially a program or a system. We fix things. And when we fix things, we say this is this and not that. We cause duality. We create duality where really there's only perception in consciousness. And of course, then we also get the substitution, right? To put in use or in place of another. To substitute, therefore, means to replace the thing in itself, that ding an zichzelf, or whatever they call it, the thing in itself, which is the actuality of the pure perception of experience. And we replace it with words. We substitute the reality of perceiving, of the conscious, aware, direct nowness of experience, with the words, the spelling. That's the real spelling. To act in place of another, substitute, to act in a place of another, or to alter. These are the definitions that even are able to be found nowadays, and they're so clear because once you see or hear the word, it has such power to see the etymology and the real meaning of it. So a spell is therefore a series of words that has magical powers. And if you're under a spell, then what you do is out of your control because your thoughts and actions are dictated by the spell. And so the real purpose of quantum resting, the real undoing of all the programming, the essential part, which is not the imported, because imported means it was taken from outside in, but the essential, which means of the essence of what we are, is to find our true place without words, prior to words, previous to that substitution or the spelling or the black magic of language which has been put upon us. Now, what you will notice is that for most people who are authentically endeavoring to describe, delineate, explain all these different versions of what we're in, what we're at, is actually still part of it. Now, to properly describe something would be to undo then, to de-scribe, to take away the lines, to take away the boxes, to take away all the limitations. And you can do that with language, but then there comes a point where the language is irrelevant. Because once the deprogramming, the de-scribing, has reached a deep enough point, we must come to that point, that still point, the silent point, the point of pure silence or pure perception, where language no longer is needed to have a false sense of getting it, of knowing it, We have to get to that point of being, of silence, of stillness. The still point, the point where we've described so well, we've reached a point where describing is completely undone. It's described, everything is described. It's undone, it's unprogrammed, it's unlineated, it's removed, it's the boundaries of language, of spelling, of the black magic itself have come to an end. That's why they say the great thinkers don't think. Because thinking, proper thinking, thinking through the passages of inquiry, of urge to undo all of the limitations, proper thinking would lead always to the end of thinking, because thinking itself is a limitation. It is a form of spelling. And so the silence, the stillness, the quantum resting, the point in which there is no longer need to be spellbound, bound by language, therefore spellbound, bound by spelling, bound by any scribing, any delineation, any system, and any institution, any subscription, anything that's under or below the reality that we are ourselves, is the true point in which silence and stillness is known not to be a dissolution or a non-existence, but actually the true point of what we are. The capacity to be able to exist as nothing, to be as nothing, knowing full well that that emptiness, that nothingness, that void of pure potentiality, the quantum field, prior to language, is itself a much fuller state of being, a much richer, a much more harmonious, and a prior state to all of the, let's say, degraded states of black magic spelling, language, thought. And so it is true to say that the final purpose, the true purpose, the authentic goal of describing something is to eventually be able to rest without descriptions, without any scribing, without any need for words, without any language. And then we are at rest, we are at peace, and we know all is well, because the spell has been broken. By being, resting, by silence, by remaining as the well-being, the goodness and rightness of just being alive, in and as the quantum field that is good, the quantum field that is right, that is true, and that is here right now. This is the divine justice that we still and always have been, this quantum field. It's right here, it's right now. All we have to do is drop the continuous need for spelling, for language. Silence is the way. Stillness is the way. Quantum resting is both the activity and the fruits of that activity, which is the non-activity. And true meditation or true quantum resting is just for several times a day, allowing, sitting down and whatever comes up, dropping it, drop the continuous spelling. And know that in our true state, in our silence, all is well, always has been, always will be, because it's now. Eternity is at rest, is free of spelling, is free of anything that is supposedly wrong and needs to be solved, especially not through thinking, spelling, describing. All is well. Silence and stillness are ever present. Just stop continuously spelling. That's quantum resting. Stop spelling, stop thinking, stop this need, this conviction that describing can actually do the job. Because it can't, it's activity itself. It is a becoming. Stop spelling and know that all is well.